Kia ora and salam. Welcome to a Yarn Live. This is the first Yarn Live in 2 years, and we have one repeat offender, as in Steve James, but on a totally new subject, which I'll introduce, and a first timer on my other side, Husain Al-Badry. And it's my absolute pleasure to finally get this discussion underway. And as you'll see from the title, it's Ramadan and being a Muslim. Here in New Zealand, we are a multicultural and hugely diverse country, and Muslims make up a big part of it. And we're going to get into some of the basics, because even I sometimes initially, before we got to this, was like, hang on, what's Islam compared to a Muslim? Is Islam a person, or what is it? So we're going to explain all of that so that we can move from not knowing to knowing and being a part of our friends' world just as much as they're a part of our world. So as much as I've bored Steve with my rugby conversations, he's going to excite me today with our conversations around being a Muslim and as well with Husain. So first of all, let me give a brief intro and they will give a full intro. I'm thinking it's actually going to be, I'm going to get this around the wrong way, but on my left on your screen is Steve James. So from Countdown Woolworths. And yes, pointing to himself, looks a little bit like me, but he's got a much bigger, much whiter beard. And Steve, if you could give us a bit of a rundown of who you are, meet the person AFQY style, but also include your relationship to the topic of being a Muslim, Ramadan, Islam, and all of the parts that we're going to talk about today.
Thanks, Ryan. So yes, Steve James, born and bred in Reefton in the west. I didn't live there. I was just born there, so that's on the west coast of the South Island. Currently work in the tech industry in New Zealand. Known Ryan and Husain for quite a while. What's my relation to this topic? So I converted to Islam about 15 years ago, happy to be here today to share some of my experiences.
So 15 years, that is a bit longer than I initially thought. I don't know why I had 7 to 8 years, but still you'll be a lot more experienced in the subject than you first told me you would be, but that's okay. The more experience, the better. And of course, Husain. So Husain, now I think of you as being one of the innovation leaders at Datacom, but have I got that right? Is that the official work title? While being a Muslim Kiwi is probably the other one. In fact, I've jumped the gun in terms of what is your relation to today's subject. Over to you, mate, to give us the full detail.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I wanted to acknowledge you as well, Ryan, for putting this on, because it's a really cool initiative. So yes, I was born in Iraq, actually, in Baghdad. And my family left Iraq after the Gulf War, and fast forward a few years later, we ended up in New Zealand. And I was 13 years old when I came here, so did high school kind of onwards in New Zealand. Trained as a software developer, and I haven't written a line of code in a decade, but I do work at Datacom. And I also, my title is Associate Director of Innovation and Growth, but I also chair the Datacom Foundation, which is quite related to Muslims, because it was actually created off the back of the March 15 attacks to support the children of those who lost some of their loved ones or their primary breadwinners and their families as well. So that's a really cool thing that Datacom doesn't really talk about. It's a community-oriented thing, but I chair that foundation. But yeah, I've been a Muslim all my life.
All your life.
Which could be a good thing or a bad thing.
I did put in the comments multi-generational, because I was trying to think of an appropriate word, but I think we'll keep it with multi-generational. And I think the beauty is that so Steve had actually said to me in the chats beforehand, let's get Husain on as well, because he's got a lot more experience, and where I might not be so onto it, he will definitely know what we're talking about. And I was like, cool, that makes good sense. So that's where it came from. And Part of the bit that we took out was I was using a bit of a tech term in the original version, which I'd called Steve the Noob and Husain the Pro. But of course, that's tech talk and maybe not quite appropriate for such a important and serious subject as this. Although we don't want to make it scary and intimidating, we want to make it fun, light, and sharing about who we are and what we do. So, shall we look at that first question, the big question? Because coming back to our tech references again, we talk about tech stacks. So whether it's a WAMP stack or a LAMP stack or the OSI model, there are always these stacks. And in my intro, I talked about what is Islam compared to Muslim? Are they part of the same thing? Or some people may not even realize. And not to jump ahead and give the answer because that's for you two. But there's a religion. There's a reference to the people that believe in the religion, and there's obviously religious artifacts, the Quran, which for those that aren't aware would be, say, the same or similar to the Bible in Christianity, and then Ramadan, which is the experience that you gentlemen are going through now with all your fellow Muslims. That is very front and center. But again, I won't let all the answers slip because that's for you to do. So who wants to dive in and start explaining that stack in one direction or the other? And
I'll make a comment before we start because
yes.
I don't think Islam is one of those things where it doesn't matter how long you've been Muslim for. Your experience doesn't get determined by the length of time you have called yourself a Muslim for. So that's why I was really against kind of calling anyone a noob or a pro, because actually I don't agree with Steve. He probably knows more about certain things than I do as well. So I'll just put that out there. But maybe I'll have an initial crack and then Steve can have a go as well. But Islam is a word that means the one who submits to God. So it's actually, while it gets used as a label for the religion, it is actually from a meaning perspective, it's got that meaning of submitting to the one God. And actually, in the Muslim belief, because we believe in the messages that came before Islam, so Christianity and Judaism, and all the prophets and messengers that came before, we actually believe that the message all along has been Islam. It has been the submission to God. So it's not, we don't, yes, we get categorized as a religion, but we think of it as a continuation of the messages that came before. So that's kind of a thing that not many people know, which is, there's a chain and a link there. And actually the articles of faith of Islam include believing in the previous scriptures and the previous messages. So believing in the Bible and the Torah and the things that came before, and the messengers that came before. So that's kind of broadly the religion. There's a lot of us now. There's, I think, 1.8 billion. I think Steve wrote a post and somebody corrected him on it. I don't even know how many, but there's a ton of us around the globe, and we're all different. So Muslim is the label for the person who's part of that group. There's also actually a name for the group. We call ourselves the Ummah, which is the nation. It's so there's a link and a brotherhood and a connection that is there, that links us all together as well. So Muslim is kind of the label that gets given to the people who are part, who ascribe to submitting to one God. Steve, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think we're already diving into it. So I think the 1.8 billion immediately signals we are all very different, right? So Husain, we were just joking before the call. There'll be things that Husain and I won't agree on. So if you exponentially times that by 1.8 billion people, there's a whole lot of different practices, different cultural aspects, which sometimes get intermingled with what the faith aspect is. But at its core, there's a few key things that all Muslims will agree on, which is, and we would call them, I guess, the 5 pillars of the faith, which is faith in God, and in Muhammad, who's we believe was a prophet or the final prophet. Charity, so charitable works, either giving money or giving your time to the community. Prayer, so you would have heard there's 5 prayers a day. Fasting is one of the pillars, so every year we will do this month-long fast of Ramadan, and then there's also some other forms of fasting you can do. And then finally the pilgrimage, where once a year, once in your lifetime, we're all encouraged that we should go and do this pilgrimage to where the faith was born. Those are the key basic aspects of what Islam is as well. But I liked what Husain was saying. There is this real camaraderie, but brothers and sisters, that's how we refer to each other. And you'll often see, even when I greet Husain, we might be it's like, hey bro, salam bro. There's hugging, there's sort of high-fiving, all that sort of stuff. It's a real thing, that there's this real connectedness between us all, even though we have these differing ways of maybe practicing our faith.
That's a really good rundown. Thank you for that, gentlemen. So you mentioned Ramadan and fasting in there a little bit, and most people probably have come across this because for years now, their Muslim friends have been doing Ramadan, which is fasting. But could we jump into that one into a little bit more detail, because that's this month, we're just coming to an end of it. So you guys are coming to the end, which is probably the toughest time, having been a month long. You'll be, I guess, feeling it. It's it's the last 20 minutes of the game. You've got to pull out everything to make it to the end. So tell us about Ramadan. Tell us about the history, the personal experience, what it's like on a day-to-day basis, especially when someone like me, because you stay, Steve, you have your lunch, you go for it like normal, but surely by day 28, when someone pulls out a almond croissant and stuffs their face, you're sitting there going.
So we never do that. I have coffees with people all the time, because my role encompasses me having to catch up with a lot of people, and people feel really awkward, and they go, oh, you're not having a coffee. I'm like, I will buy you the coffee. I want you to have the coffee. It's perfectly fine. I'll maybe just break down the actual rituals of it, and Steve can give a perspective as well, having come into it. The ritual is a day-long fast. So we start at dawn, so that's before sunrise. So at the moment, that's about 6 o'clock in the morning, and we fast until sunset. And so these days, that's about 7:30. So it's around a 13-hour fast, 13 and a half. It's a dry fast, so a lot of people get confused and go, oh, so you just want water? It's like, no, there's no water involved either. It is a complete fast from any food or drink, and sexual relations as well, actually. So during that time that you're fasting, and there's a whole bunch of other things, like you shouldn't swear or backbite or do nasty things to people anytime, but especially during Ramadan, you're extra vigilant about the way the words that come out of your mouth and all of those things. So and lowering your gaze and all that sort of stuff. So there's a high level of spirituality that's actually involved in the month, and a lot of that is really training. It's kind of like a boot camp. It's a boot camp throughout the year where you're training yourself to restrain yourself. You're developing empathy for those who don't necessarily have what you have, and you're trying to fill up on the spiritual aspect of things. So personally, I don't find it hard at all. Like the hardest parts are probably the lack of sleep, because you engage in a bit more. Your schedule gets disrupted. There's night prayers that happen and things like that. So your sleep kind of gets messed up a little bit, but food-wise, it's easy. But okay. Steve, what do you think?
Ryan, did you want to jump in with something?
No, I'll save my questions till the end.
Okay. It's funny, but by the way, I can't speak for Husain. I'm not a scholar, what we call a scholar, or someone who is being taught how to talk about Islam. So I'm just relating my personal experiences. I think Husain probably is too. Just so in case anyone wants to take this as, oh, this scholar Steve told me I should do X, Y, Z. These are my personal experiences. This may surprise some people. I love Ramadan. I really do. I love it. I love fasting. And so my issue is not the sleeping, it's the lack of coffee. So the first couple of days I get massive headaches because I drink a lot of coffee, right? So I have coffees in the evening with my beautiful machine over my shoulder. I'll grab one and drink it on the way to the evening prayers. Hey baby. But I do love it. Now, why do I love it? So there is the spiritual aspect and the, I guess the purely Islamic aspect. But what I truly love about it is we live in a, pretty consumer-driven society. I'm in a position of privilege where I can buy the things that I would like for myself. So this is probably that one time of year that I really challenge myself to deny myself something. And it's a really powerful practice to actually deny yourself something, because in this society, you can kind of have whatever you want if you have the means. And so I get a lot out of that because it makes me reflect, as Hussein said, there are people in the world, in this country, probably in my street and neighborhood, who maybe do this every day. Maybe they have one meal a day. Maybe they have one meal every 2 days. And it's a reminder to me and my children that actually, that this is a privileged position. And when you have that first drink and food in the evening, there is a moment where you go, oh, wow, yeah, this is amazing that we can do this. And it sounds a little unusual. And then by about a week in, the hunger pangs, like I'm feeling hungry now, but it doesn't bother me. I start to like them. I start to go, yeah, this is reminding me to be a better person, or to not swear so much, or not gossip about people at the office, do some extra charity for that person I see on the street that needs a bit of a hand. And it becomes like this companion through the fasting period, this hunger. And then the funny thing that happens to me personally at the end is that first day when we eat again, I kind of feel a little bit of regret. I'm kind of like, oh, I'm not going to be fasting anymore. I'm kind of just going back to it. It is such a weird thing. But I enjoy it. And the other thing that goes hand in hand with Ramadan is the eating together. So whether it's eating with your family in the evening, or going to the mosque and eating with a couple of hundred people, or meeting up with, families gathering together, it is more so than any other time of year. You can wander into a mosque around the time of breaking fast and there'll be a meal on. You're all welcome. Come and sit down and eat with your brothers and sisters who are, celebrating. It's quite a beautiful thing. Yeah. So that's my take on it.
Wow. Thank you both for all of those various bits and pieces of your personal experience, and I guess more the official, we won't say, I don't know if you should say scholar, version from Hussein at the beginning. So a couple of questions there. It's almost like it reminds you or teaches you of gratefulness again. And we can take that for granted in some ways. So by putting yourself through that pain each day for the month, it is, that's a 12th of the year. It's a pretty good reminder of making you feel grateful for what you have. And as you say, empathetic for those that may not. And there's quite a bit of charity work. So we were almost going to have Janet Milkball on as well. However, she has parent-teacher interviews at the very time of this interview, so she was unable to join us. But I've had conversations with her through the time, and she's talked about, and you've both mentioned it as well, is doing charity work. So would you be able to share some of the charity work that each of you have been doing over the month and give us some sort of idea of what that means? I imagine there might be a scale of doing the simple little thing to the more organized and arranged exercises that might happen. But any stories for us from this year or past years that might be of interest?
Okay, I'll jump in here. So there's a part of the fast is a specific type of giving. So where you work out how much you earn and you give some money. So look, certainly for me this time of year, we make a concerted effort to give a decent amount of our personal wealth to somewhere in the world or locally that is doing it tough. All right. So there's a specific place in the world this year we thought, you know what? There are people who are Muslim or not Muslim who are wanting to meet with their families and do what I'm doing and that I'm getting this benefit from. And I want them to be able to do that too. So we've given some finances to something overseas. And then I guess locally, our family just becomes a bit more aware of people who are sleeping rough on the street. So if we see someone outside a supermarket, we don't pass them by. we'll go and buy them a meal, like a proper, not just we'll buy you a bottle of Fanta. Cool, that's really going to help. No, we go in and think, what would this person really need? Let's get them like the top end drink and the best food, and so that they too can have that moment where they go, oh, hey, that's cool, and you can just leave a bit of a blessing that way. So that's kind of the stuff we do in our family.
Yeah, it's very, very similar to what Steve said. There's a couple of other beautiful things, like we're encouraged to, so there's a lot of blessing in helping someone break their fast as well. So we tend to invite other people or put on meals for other people to break their fast, and that could be family and friends, or it could be people that that you don't necessarily have a relationship with as well. My daughter is actually in a state integrated school that has an Islamic focus on it, and they're doing an orphan jar. So they've got money collection that's going. So even the kids are kind of getting into that mode of thinking of, how do I give? How do I create a different condition for other people as well, other than myself, which is quite cool.
It's beautiful. That is, and it gives them that appreciation from being a young child. And I think sometimes we tend to forget what it's like back in those days. But whether it's learning, your ABCs, learning to give to others is a very important lesson. That potentially those who aren't part of any religion aren't exposed to. So yeah, it's a really, really nice skill there. So before we get on to the 5 prayers, which I've got a couple of questions about, the last thing about Ramadan was when there's the breaking of Ramadan at the end, I believe that's quite the celebration because it's the end. But I'm not wrong. I've been invited to attend one of those before in the past years. So is it typical that you would invite non-Muslims to celebrate that with you, or is that just something that might have happened to me in the past through a friend?
Everybody is absolutely. So it is a festive time. So we tend to celebrate it with other people. We do start the day. So the first day of Eid is called Eid al-Fitr, which means the festival of the breaking of the fast. Eid means festival. We start that with prayers. So there is a prayer element to it. But actually this year we've got, and every year we kind of hold a big celebration. So if you pop into Eden Park, probably on Thursday, the 11th of April, maybe before you head into work, there's a Auckland Eid Day or New Zealand Eid Day, I think it's called, where we've got food stalls. So after the prayers happen there at Eden Park, and then everybody comes down, there's food stalls and games for the kids and entertainment and all sorts. So it's absolutely, it's not it's a celebration for us. It's not a celebration to go, yay, the fast is over, we're done. Because like Steve said, so Ramadan has a very deep place in our hearts. And so we look forward to it coming throughout the year, and then we feel sad about it departing at the end. But it is, it is a festival that's been prescribed to us. And so we do celebrate.
Awesome. Well,
yeah, look, Ryan, you should come. So let's just make that happen.
See you on the 11th.
100%.
The three of us will definitely meet up. I did bump into Hussein last year, and he was wearing some pretty sharp trainers, if I remember rightly.
No, you were the one wearing the Jordans.
Was it me?
You who was wearing the Jordans.
You looking pretty sweet. I love the Eid Day is awesome, man. I love it. So for a start, it's the one day of the year that those trashy deep fried hot dogs with batter around them that you get at like the stock cars. It's the one day of the year they have halal versions, and me and my wife rock down there, and it's like because they're so nasty, but they're so awesome at the same time. Anyway, the Eid Day is so cool. So not the whole community, but it feels like the whole community gathers, and there's politicians and people who want to kiss babies and get photos and all that, but there's also people bringing their friends, and there's the kids who are trying to skive off school who I've got to go to Eid Day, I'm Muslim, I've got to go. They all pile in, so you've got heaps and heaps of people there, and the the clothing is just spectacular. Everyone, so one of the things we practice is for Eid, you wear your best outfit, or you buy a new outfit to celebrate if you're able to.
I wonder what
And
you're
so
talking about. I was like,
yes, so people are they're dressed in a lot of traditional dress, but also that's the day I bring out my special Jordans that I never take out of the box. They come out on that day because I want to just feel my absolute best. And you eat and you laugh, and there's lots of salam bro, salam sis, how are you, and many connections are made. So yeah, I think you would thoroughly enjoy it, and probably know a lot of people down there as well.
awesome. That sounds really good. Now we just got 5 minutes left, or a few minutes left. We can go a little bit over time, but we want to respect all the listeners' time as well. So prayers 5 times a day. I was going to ask. Look, we do have our first comment. Everyone's been kind of quiet. I've been a bit surprised, but also I normally am putting in timestamp comments, but I have been in my first time back in 2 years, a little bit concentrated on the conversation, as you might expect. But there we go. Steve is sponsored by Nike. Yeah.
Who's that guy?
Yeah, who's that guy? Get out of here, Tiago.
We all know Thiago. And yes, we probably all wish we were sponsored by Nike. But the 5 prayers a day, why 5, not 2, not 10? What's the number related to? If you can help us understand that part first of all.
I don't know the answers to the why. So Hussein, I'm going to throw it your way, man.
So the story goes that there's a famous story in the faith where the prophet was ascended to the heavens, and he was given the commandment of prayer then, and I think it was 50 prayers a day, and as he kind of descended, he had a lot of helpers to try and pull down the number of prayers, and it became 5 at the end. That's kind of how the
like 10 people doing 5 each.
But if you think about where they're placed throughout the day, they are literally like 5 break stations where you go, okay, there's a dawn prayer right at the start, and so you wake up, you wash up, you go and do your dawn prayer, and that sets you up for the day spiritually. There's a noon prayer where, as you've been going through your day, you take a stop. So I'll be going to the prayer room. We've got a prayer room here at Datacom, and doing my prayers soon. And that's your stop during the day. There's probably towards the end of our workday, there's also a prayer, an afternoon prayer, which is again another checkpoint before you start your second segment of the day, the evening, and then you've got a sunset one, and you've got an evening one as well. So to me, they're like stations in the day where you go, okay, I'm going to take a break here, and I'm going to reconnect myself with my Creator, and so it's a beautiful experience.
Well, and just to build on that, that if you don't have faith, you might be going, okay, cool, you're going to go and say some words to the ether, right? However, even just from a mindfulness practice, I would challenge you to set some time aside, 5 minutes, 5 times a day, at the times that Hussein has mentioned, to just reflect on your day. Even it is a powerful moment, whether you're going to be praying or not. And so I get a lot out of it. I don't always adhere to it. I don't want to pretend that I'm knocking those 5 out of the park every day. But the times when I stop and pause and reflect, there are powerful moments. And I think for all of us in our workday, we can get just dragged through these insane days, meeting to meeting to meeting. Taking a pause for yourself to actually reflect on how you're feeling, if you have faith, talking to your Creator, all that sort of stuff. They're powerful moments, and I thoroughly recommend it, whether you're Muslim, Christian, or have no faith at all, to just take that time for yourself.
Well, I was going to jump in and share a couple of things. So my nana was Irish Catholic. She'll always be Irish, but one of her complaints was, and I won't put into her words because that includes a minor swear word, but you can be a bad person 6 days of the week and then go and repent on the 7th day and then go and be bad again for the next 6. And there's a lot of, obviously, back context into what was happening in Ireland at the time related to that. But her thing was, if you are all the time, not just one day a week. So by doing it 5 times a day, that is, reconnecting you and keeping that fresh in front of mind. Because yes, things can, over 6 days, things can unravel, and over time, you drift away from it, right? So that's one point. Another comparison is when I was learning te reo and learning karakia, is often termed as a prayer and has a relationship to Christianity, but that's because of the missionaries. They happen to be Christian missionaries that came here. But prior to colonization and missionaries, karakia was an incantation. So you do a karakia at the beginning of a special time and the conclusion of a special time. And when I first was learning about it, I was like, this is like a team talk. You get everyone together for the team talk at the beginning. You get everyone like focused on something, whether it's like my rugby and before you go and play, or maybe it's a piece of an innovation workshop at Datacom or something like that. But so where I was getting to this is that without getting into every religion or every type of faith, I think there's a similarity around keeping that focus and keep reminding. So I think people talk about in business, at least, or at least in the SaaS world, will say, what is the North Star of that business? So if I use that as a all-encompassing, non-religious sort of statement, it helps you focus on your North Star, and in your case, Islam, and focusing on your religion. So another wee bit on that one, I hear references to Allah, Muhammad, God. God, I probably recognize from Christianity. I'm not Christian. I'm probably atheist is probably the simple, probably spiritualist is probably more correct. I'm not atheist, but spiritualist. But who are these different figures and how do they relate in terms of how I just learned today? You believe in all of it together. It's not a Islam and nothing else. Islam includes it, sort of all the other parts to it. So
continuation. Yeah. So Allah means the God. It's an Arabic word for the God.
So it's an Arabic
word. Arab Christians say Allah as well. So it's the same thing.
Okay, there we go. So they're not two different things; they're the same thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Muhammad was the prophet. Are there other?
Muhammad was the messenger who brought the message. Yeah. So for and he brought the scripture of the Quran. The Quran is the word of God as we believe, and it's not a collation of it's not a collation of stories or narrations. It is the one narration, and it's been preserved over the last 1400 years through people who memorize it. So there's a whole bunch of people around the world who have memorized completely the Quran. And it's quite a substantial book, and I haven't even memorized like 5% of the Quran, and you've got people who have really, really outstanding memory, and they've memorized the whole thing. So that's how it's preserved over the years as well.
Well, there's key parts of this is not about me and my journey, but I stepped into Christianity for a short 6 weeks. That's a story for another day. But the one psalm that will remember forever, which is why I stepped into it, is Romans 15:13. So you can, if anyone wants to look it up, they can. I will go and have a look at the Quran, and because I assume it's all online as well. I can search the Quran online, or is it not online?
Steve, you might have some recommendations for reading.
Yeah. Look, you can look it up online. I think jumping straight into the Quran is a big ask, because it is written in a way that was a kind of this elevated language, like not poetry, but kind of it's not like we're talking here and now. So I think just jumping straight in without any guidance, you might go finding it a little bit hard to connect. But I would recommend, Ryan and anyone else, and I see there's a couple of questions coming through. The No Nonsense Guide to Islam was a book that I've given to a few people to read, not to try and convert them. They're just going, I don't understand why you're doing this. This is weird. And so I just gave them this to understand. And it's a really good sort of, it's not an in-depth thing. It's a pretty quick read, but I'd recommend having a look at that, and you'll know a lot more than most people about Islam.
Okay. So got a couple of questions through from Robert Carson. I put the first one up just a moment ago, and this question, this is the first of two. Apparently before I see all the good questions, so that's cool. How do you balance modern life with adhering to Islamic principles and teachings?
Yeah, I want to jump in here because I'm passionate about this, right? So, as is Hussein, I'm not saying Hussein's not. So, thanks for the question, Robert. Nice to meet you. The way that I live my life, Islamic life, is very complementary to just being a good human. Like it's. I don't find it super challenging. So, your big differences are going to be, we don't drink alcohol. Well, I didn't drink alcohol anyway for some other reasons, which we won't go into. So, that's quite good for me. Being good to your fellow person, that's just part of being life. So probably the prayers during the day, if you're going to adhere to your 5 prayers, there's that sort of that moment where you might have to say to your boss, I just need to step away and have a prayer, and that might make you feel a little bit awkward at first, but it's becoming more normal. And there's some traditional dress type stuff that sometimes happens, but you see I'm wearing a t-shirt, Hussein's wearing a t-shirt and a jacket. We could choose to wear something that's a bit more loose fitting. The idea around the clothing is that it's showing a bit of humility. So you don't want to show off your big muscles and all that sort of stuff. You would just want to keep it plain as much as possible. But I don't think it really clashes that much. And certainly in our Kiwi culture, now that there's a little bit more awareness of Islam, I think it's becoming a little bit more natural. We're probably still fairly early in our Islamic journey in New Zealand, where we're probably maybe 2nd, 3rd generation. You don't have people tens of generations, say in the UK, where it's become quite secularized and integrated. It is still, you're probably still going to cast your eyes up at someone and go, oh, they're wearing a head covering, a hijab. That's interesting. Whereas overseas, it's a bit more normal. So, but I don't think there's a huge culture clash between what I believe and choose to practice and what I would have to do in my normal everyday life. I don't know how Hussein feels about that.
I think mostly I totally agree with Steve. There's probably a few things where, how I feel, for example, about, there's a big culture here where, people go out for drinks. And so that's where you connect, and that's where you network, and that's where, the softer kind of social capital gets formed. And it's not the place that we want to be, really. Like I've done some of them where I turn up and I'll drink a Coke or whatever, but I don't prefer that sort of setting. And so just I think being aware and accommodating for that, or at least having it in the back of your mind is really important. I think there's a few things like, there's a few deeper things around, actually practical things around halal, for example. Halal, Steve mentioned halal sausages. So in New Zealand, actually, we're quite blessed because a big portion of the New Zealand meat market exports overseas to Muslim countries. So most of our meat is actually halal in New Zealand. It's just about raising the awareness for restaurants to be able to cook it in the right way. But it is, finding an appropriate thing to eat that hasn't, that's been cooked properly can be a bit challenging. There's a few aspects like, interest. So banking and the whole world of interest. Interest is prohibited in Islam. So it makes it a bit trickier. So there's a whole, world of Islamic banking. I see someone put a question up around how can tech support Islam, and that's really that's a whole world out there where there is Islamic banking and Islamic dating apps, and there's even a Muslim social network that's I think up and coming. So
I have missed that question around how can tech support Muslim, but the banking and the halal are two interesting questions. So maybe it'd be good to run through what halal is, because I picked up and I knew that there was a way that the meat is prepared. I think potentially the way the animal was killed and the meat processed, but then also the way it is cooked. So does someone want to jump onto that and give us a quick run through of the process from farm to plate? In
simple terms, there's halal, which is permissible, and haram, which is not permissible, right? So they're the two concepts we have. So alcohol, for example, is haram, not permissible. So there's a whole set of things that fall within halal and haram. I also want to point out, one of the key things that drew me to Islam is that there is no compulsion in religion. That's from the Quran. That I can't actually make anyone do anything or another Muslim do anything. If they want to drink alcohol, that is actually entirely up to them. I'm not going to get involved, right? I might not agree with it. But the core concepts that we try and live by, this halal and haram principles, right? So the food is killed in a certain way. It's not barbaric. I have been along with a farmer who wasn't Muslim and done a halal kill with a knife to kill an animal, and he said, "Oh, that's how we do it anyway." Whereas when we first arrived, he went, "I hear you Muslims like it slow and painful." I was like, no, that's actually not what we want the animal. We want the animal to be respected, killed quickly and as painlessly as possible. But yes, of course, you're taking a life. And then you want to make sure that as that goes to the plate, it's not cooked with alcohol, it's not cooked with pork, a few other things like that.
And it's treated respectfully as well.
Yeah,
treated respectfully.
100%. And look, for something to be truly halal, it needs to be fair trade as well. There can't be anyone who is taken advantage of in that process. So technically, you probably need to grow the food yourself. Like, really, if you wanted to be pure about it, you probably need to raise that yourself, because I don't know what's happened to some of those products along the way. So there is this real carefulness to try and do the right thing with the food and the things that we have and consume. Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing, because a lot of my references maybe benchmarking, because that's a very human thing to do, to what you already know, and that being Christianity. And all the things I've never heard in Christianity is around so there's similarities with no alcohol. In fact, I think they say low alcohol, or it depends which denomination you speak to. But the not doing anyone wrong throughout the process, or looking after everyone in the process, which is the not anti-capitalism, but certainly the world does have its fair share of capitalism in the world. Therefore, it's a really nice inference that we're making sure that everyone is looked after throughout the process. So I find that quite refreshing and a really nice part of it. The other thing I was going to ask, the one thing I was going to say is, I thought halal was purely about meat, but halal and haram are two principles about how you look at a range of things. So that's very interesting. Now, we did have a second question from Robert there, which is, how do you see tech? Oh, that's where it is. Sorry, I read that earlier. I thought he was talking about teaching. How do you see tech helping Islam and supporting the changes in the world? That's a perfect question for you two.
It's an awesome question. I mean, there is a.
I think it's.
By the way, on the screen you're pointing at Ryan, but there you go. There's a lot of stuff going on in that space where tech is a real scale mechanism, and it's a connector, right? So we have like Steve said, we've got a very young and small community of Muslims here in New Zealand, and so anything that can enable us to connect with the rest of the world and Muslims in other parts of the world is really important. So tech is starting to play more of a role in that, whether it's the charity giving and the funding, or things like Islamic finance and Islamic banking. My brother-in-law him and his wife found each other on a Tinder for Muslims, but like Tinder is a way of connecting to people, but Muzmatch, which is the Muslim version, is looking for a life partner. So that's a totally different departure point, right? It's not your traditional kind of dating approach. So there's a lot of ways in which tech can help scale the relationship side of things for Muslims as well.
Yes. Well, if you think about it in the sense of back a couple hundred years ago, you would find your match in the village, or you might have to go to the next village. But we live with the concept of globalization. So if you don't find someone sort of, I guess, I don't want to think of all the terms run through my head. They're not really fitting from natural, what's not natural, or natural, usual, what's usual these days or not. But Muzmatch enables you to find or be matched with someone who might be on the other side of the world, but really suits you and you suit them, and helps you find your love. What I'm saying is, 200 years ago, we didn't live in a globalized world. We didn't even think about the person on the other side of the world, whereas now we can and do, because it's a normal part of everyday life. So
it doesn't have to be like my brother-in-law and his wife. They both live in the UK and they found themselves there. So it's, but it doesn't have to be that you're finding someone in the Muslim world. It's but it is a connection. It's a great connection tool.
Yeah, look, I think in the tech space as well. Sorry, I know we're going over time, Ryan, but
okay.
I'm gonna talk anyway. You can't stop me. The other thing in the tech space, I think what we can all do, whether we're Muslim or not, is anywhere where there's marginalization or underrepresentation, we can all have a part in that. So say if we talk about our Pacifica Māori brothers and sisters, but underrepresented in tech, you and I have talked before about what can I do to bring them in. I think having things like this where you're a little bit more aware can make your workplace safe for people to express themselves as they are, and they don't have to conform, So if someone wants to wear a head covering, I wonder why they're wearing a head covering. That's a little unusual. Things like this help you just go, I need to make that safe for my entire team, because, Muslims who are in the tech industry, they just want to build great tech, just like every other person. They don't necessarily just want to build it for Islam or build it for Muslims. They want to innovate and come together and do great things. So I think in the tech industry, we can make that environment a lot more inviting as well.
Yeah, kia ora.
Can I just jump in on that? Oh, sorry, Hussein.
I was just going to highlight something, which is the value of equality is actually very central to us. So there is really, because Islam is so universal and pervasive, and Muslims come in all shapes and sizes and colors. Like the value of equality and the lack of hierarchy in Islam is actually I don't know. It's something we really appreciate. So being able to do what Steve said is that's really important.
Yeah. So just on this concept, one of you mentioned rugby and drinking before. I think it was at least after work drinks. Maybe I've mentioned rugby. And in some ways, that was joked about being New Zealand's religion for many years. And of course, the thing is, looking at the point of the people who are Muslim and working in tech, they just want to build great tech just like anyone else. When you said that, I kind of went, of course, but there may be some people out there that think that people who are into their rugby and drinking really want to building tech for that or live for that. So it goes all ways, but the core message is that underneath all of this is that we're all human. And of course, we all want to work together, get along, and I find it really, really enjoyable not hanging out with 100 me's. If everyone was like me, I think I would go nuts. So that diversity discussion is important, not just for the things that they put on the brochures, like the more diverse an organization, the more successful it is. But it's just more interesting to learn about people, and this is partly why I do what I do with these yarn lives, is to help share these stories and help expose some of the concepts and ideas that people may not get to hear or speak to or learn about, or maybe not today, maybe they could in the future, but it's not present. So the idea is to share these concepts. And I think what we'll do is we'll start wrapping up. So I'm just going to do a quick rundown and brief and give you both a moment to think of your parting thoughts. What's your final thoughts to leave everyone with? So today was the first Yarn Live in roughly 2 years, and we're looking at Ramadan and being a Muslim. It's a subject that Steve and myself have wanted to cover for a couple of years, along with Janet, who wasn't able to be here, and of course Husain, who is here with us. So good place to start is to get that in before this month ends, because this is the end of Ramadan, which is a month of fasting, as we've heard in detail from Steve and Husain. And that's one of the activities associated with the religion of Islam, and part of being a Muslim. And that's been the essence of what we've learned about of some of the, I guess, facts and stacks and what it's like and what is it to be Muslim. So that, just to run through, the religion is Islam. I'm just trying to think of I'll call it the official book is the Quran, and the way we reference the people that believe in Islam is Muslim. So the Ramadan is one of the activities. We've also talked and looked at the 5 prayers and where they come from, and the fact that people will go to the prayer room and do that. And of course, just ended on that whole diversity and inclusion picture, because if you're into your rugby and drinking, if you're into your Muslim and Islam, if you're into your Christianity, your Buddhism, or just hanging out on the beach, that's your choice. That's who you are. And you add to the colourful makeup of New Zealand and the world. And we love you all and accept you all. And today we've been learning about Muslim. So with that, gentlemen, I'd invite you to share your parting thoughts, which is where we will end. I will conclude with a final thank you, but I'll let you to share your final thoughts. So I'll let you jump in whichever order you'd like to go.
I'll go. Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for giving us the opportunity. It is obviously something very precious to myself and Husain. My key message, I guess, is Muslims are human. You don't all have to have glasses and a shaved head, by the way. That just happens to be random for me and Husain. But and I think the important thing for me is that to recognize this about anything that is not you. So whether you're talking about Māori people or people from the LGBTQ community, don't other them. So don't other Muslims and go, oh, well, that's Muslims. That's the Muslims. Take the effort to learn and have conversations like this. You don't have to agree with everything that those people believe, but it's really important for the diversity of our workplaces and what we create. And that diversity is not just an important thing to tick box. You're going to get heaps better outcomes and have heaps richer environments in your businesses. So thoroughly encourage you to get out there and learn about those things that you may be a little bit unsure about. That's all from me. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And echo everything Steve said. And I think I'd invite you to go to your Eid Day at your local. So there's ones running, I think, in different parts of the country. And so, pop in and do celebrate with us. And, go and immerse yourself in environments like, going to Muslim countries or, going to your local mosque. We're very welcoming people, so you're always welcome.
All right, thank you both. So in closing, I'd like to offer you both huge thanks for your time and effort in coming on and covering this subject, because I think I'll be frank, there is some ignorance towards it, and Steve, you even made a reference about we're humans as well, which made me sort of think, for you to say something like that, it sort of says something. And this is the whole point of A Few Quiet Yarns. It's all about connection. It's all about understanding. It's all about awareness and building those bridges so that people can actually find out those points of interest. In some cases, they'll be surprised. They'll learn something new. In other cases, they may have already knew it but not realize. So all of these touch points that bring us together are all opportunities for us to connect and share being human together. So I'll just close off by saying, before I end the stream, thank you both for sharing about yourselves and about being Muslims. And I look forward to sharing Breaking Eid or Eid Day on the 11th of April at Eden Park with you. So I'll organise that, and we'll look forward to sharing that and building my knowledge of experience. And for all those of you out there watching that have watched parts of this, all of it, thank you very much for your time, and I hope that you will investigate. Probably the easiest way is through your friend who happens to be Muslim, who might be sitting beside you or around the office, or the other kid in the sports team that plays a sport with your kid, or whatever the case might be. But there will be someone in your world, probably multiple, that you can go and say, hey, I just saw this thing and got a bit of an idea and I'd like to learn more. So go and investigate that and explore that and have fun with it. And with that, gentlemen, we'll say goodbye to everybody.
Ka kite.
Ka kite. Thank you, everybody.